Today on Verbal to Visual, sketch notes of an interview from the Story podcast with guest Todd Henry. For this one, I've decided to start by using index cards to capture the most interesting ideas from the conversation, and then look to see if an overarching model or story presents itself that I can use when I break out the big marker to create a one-page visual summary on the paper beneath those index cards. So this is an example of two-stage sketchnoting, because you have one approach on the first pass through a set of ideas, and then another approach on the second pass through when you complete your notes. For me, this can be useful when I want to keep open the option of connecting something that happens in the first 5 minutes of the conversation with something that happens in the last 5 minutes. That's harder to do when you're filling up the page in the moment while the conversation is happening. The downside of this approach is that it probably does take a bit more time compared to one-stage real-time sketchnoting. But for me, the flexibility makes it worth it to, at least some of the time, use this two-stage approach. And what's nice about index cards is that they're easy to move around. So once you've listened to an entire podcast and have a bunch of interesting ideas on each card, you get to play around with how you might organize those ideas on the page and think about what visual elements you might want to use to help them stand out. That's what I'm doing here. And even though I'm not clear yet on every detail, I've got enough organization to start making marks on that poster paper. The podcast that I'm listening to is about stories and storytelling, as the name implies. And most stories begin with someone choosing to go on a journey. And what that requires, according to Todd Henry, is forgetting what you fear you're incapable of so that you can embrace what you might be capable of becoming. And in this episode, Todd shares a bit of his story of leading a creative team in his mid-20s, but feeling the itch to teach in his early 30s, and his decision to start a podcast as an avenue for teaching and for exploring the deeper stories that he thought were worth telling. And now he considers himself an arms dealer for the creative revolution, equipping people with the mindset, tools, and relationships to thrive in today's create-on-demand world. And as a longtime follower of his work, I think he is succeeding in that mission. One of the dynamics that they explored in this conversation was the balance needed between challenge and stability. How those engaged in creative work need both in order to thrive, and too much of one or the other creates an imbalance that won't bring out the best work. And then a large chunk of the conversation explored the differences between and the transition from a maker to a manager, and how makers do everything they can to control the circumstances and processes surrounding their work, but how managers can't do that and instead must focus on the influence they have on their team doing good work. Good managers do 3 things, according to Todd Henry. They accomplish the work while developing the team to tackle new and more challenging work. And then what might have been the most powerful and lasting message for me from this conversation, the idea that you are building a body of work that tells a story. The question, though, is this: is that story yours or someone else's? Are you being true to your own vision for the work, or are you letting others define what it should be and what it should look like? So these are just a handful of the ideas that came up during this podcast episode. I encourage you to listen to the full thing so that you can get the entire context behind these ideas and many others. As I think about how these ideas impact my work, I recognize that I have a lot of control over the challenge versus stability balancing act. And I think that part of what I'm still trying to figure out is how best to build both into the routines that I create for myself. Right now, I'm leaning on the stability of a newly simplified approach to the videos that I'm making, which I'll explain in more depth at some point, while also challenging myself to tell good stories and create engaging videos within the simplified constraints that I've set up for myself. And since I don't manage a team of creatives, that transition from maker to manager isn't super applicable to me, but there are some parallels, I think, to the transition from a maker to a teacher, which is what I consider myself to be. And how, in that case, my job as a teacher isn't to control the people that I teach, but instead to equip those I teach with the tools to do good work. I think that's also what Todd Henry is doing as an arms dealer for the creative revolution. And when it comes to the body of work that I'm building, to be honest, I don't yet know what story it will tell, but I think that I'm getting closer and closer to telling each chapter of that story in a way that's true to me. And it's by focusing on each chapter, each paragraph, each sentence, and even each word that I'm able to slowly uncover the story that maybe has been there all along. For today, though, I'm pretty happy with this small piece of that ongoing story in the way in which starting with rough notes on cheap index cards got the momentum going. So know that this is one option for you too, the next time you sit down to listen to ideas and capture those that resonate. Thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the ideas that I chose to highlight from this episode of the Story Podcast, and I'll be back again soon with more ideas that I find to be worth visualizing. Till next time.